Good evening and welcome to the March 25th, 2020 regular council meeting. It's a balmy minus this day. Please don't change your tires yet. I don't think snow is gone. It's that time of year where we could get almost anything from now till the beginning of April, so take it easy. Ooh, we got a bit of an echo going on here. Members of council, there is an agenda before you. Councillor Myers with the motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Administration, anything to add to the agenda?
Nothing to add, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. It's time for public input session. We allow members of the public to speak to council about anything that is not on the current agenda. Administration, has anyone registered to speak?
Through the Deputy Mayor, no one has registered.
Thank you. Is there anyone in council chambers that would like to speak to council about anything that is not on the current agenda? Seeing none. We'll move on to presentation and delegations. There are no presentations scheduled for this evening, so we will move to the number 5 on our agenda, statutory public hearing. Oh, as well, there is no public hearing this evening. Moving on to approve our council meeting minutes. Councillor Loynes, for the motion, please.
Town Council approved the March 11th, 2024 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Members of council, you had the opportunity to read and review the council meeting minutes from March 11th, 2024. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Whoa. That is carried. Thank you. Councillor boards and committees. Councillor Hansard, for the motion, please.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, there was a lot of those in our package this time. I move that Town Council receive the council board and committee minutes for information.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Members of council, any questions or comments? Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just a question, I believe this would be to you as the representative on the library board. Just noticed we have a very significant number of minutes here from June through November of last year, I believe still. And I'm just wondering, was there a process in place or a challenge that occurred that caused us not to receive minutes for such a long period of time?
That's a great question. I'll defer that to administration.
Thank you, through the Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Laurie. We ran into a little bit of a challenge with some of the board restructuring last fall, and some of the minutes just got missed. And so we've worked with the library board to get the minutes all brought forward, and worked with them to ensure that we've put improvements in place to be certain that the minutes will be coming forward on a timely basis going forward.
Excellent. Thank you. And just to follow up on that, so on that I see, for example, the June 21st, 2023 minutes, the signature that's on them notes the date as March 13th, 2024. So is the library board not reviewing their own minutes at their next meeting?
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie, the library board is reviewing their minutes. With a number of changeover of board members last year. There was a little bit of a challenge with some of the signing, and so we did connect with the ministry on the proper way of rectifying some of those issues, and the Act very clearly states that the chair shall sign it, but it doesn't specifically say it has to be the chair presiding at the meeting. So we've taken the steps to ensure all of the minutes are up to date and accurate.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Loynes.
I'm good. My questions have been asked and answered.
Thank you. Any further? Seeing no more, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Bylaws. We have 2 bylaws scheduled this evening. The first is the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board bylaw. Administration, please proceed with the presentation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you to Council. So the Municipal Government Act requires that every municipality shall establish or enter into an agreement to establish a Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, commonly referred to as the SDAB. As per the town's regular bylaw review process, the current SDAB bylaw was subject to review in 2023. The town's current SDAB functions with integrity and fairness and has operated as a strong administrative tribunal for the town over the past few years. Administration believes the existing board is committed to its purpose and evaluates appeals in an objective and consistent manner. To further strengthen the composition of the board and to reflect the principles of natural justice, administration is proposing changes to the SDAB process to include modifications to the bylaw content and some minor clerical and administrative updates. This presentation will provide a general overview of the role of an SDAB, the proposed bylaw amendments, the composition of the board, training requirements, revision to chair selection, role of the clerk, and proposed remuneration for members. The Subdivision and Development Appeal Board is a quasi-judicial board that hears appeals related to the subdivision and development of land. Members of the board are appointed by council. However, the board itself operates as an independent and impartial administrative tribunal. The decisions of the board are final and cannot be overturned unless the board makes an error in some aspect of law or jurisdiction. The SDAB is vital to achieving municipal purposes set out in legislation, including safe and viable communities and the well-being of the environment. Good land planning decisions can improve the quality of physical environment and promote orderly, economical, and beneficial land use development. Poor land planning decisions may result in inefficient or unsafe development that risks environmental degradation, property damage, and even personal injury. SDAB decisions help shape communities, and their decisions have permanent effects on the lives of property owners, residents, and the community. There is an expectation that SDAB hearings are conducted without bias, both perceived and actual. To maintain a fair and impartial lens while sitting as a member of the board, SDAB members must recognize the potential conflict between their role in the community, whether that be resident, business owner, or council member, and the adjudicative role required while sitting as a board member on an appeal hearing. SDABs use procedures that are designed to achieve a fair, transparent, and independent hearing process. SDAB proceedings typically involve submissions from many different parties, including landowners and public authorities. Members are expected to apply a wide variety of provincial and municipal land use planning requirements, and in certain cases have broad discretion to apply the requirements to achieve appropriate results for particular circumstances. SDAB members should understand their legislative and quasi-judicial responsibilities and be familiar with the relevant plans, policies, and bylaws. Members are expected to review agenda packages to become familiar with and understand the case before them. Be prepared to ask relevant questions at the hearing to clarify information provided. Attend the entire hearing. Hear from all parties in an open, fair, and objective manner. Concentrate on and ensure all evidence is considered and that the decision is based on the evidence provided during the hearing. To strengthen and enhance the SDAB, the bylaw has been amended to provide increased clarity, process improvements, alignment with current legislative requirements, removal of redundant procedural matters, and reorganization for logical flow. As the decisions of the board impact the town, recruiting individuals who have comprehensive understanding of land use matters and who understand the importance of providing independent and impartial decision-making is a key element. It is important to structure the board for members to provide responsible use of the power and responsibility given to it, as the decisions of the board are final and cannot be overturned unless the board makes an error in some aspect of law or jurisdiction. The bylaw proposes a composition of 6 public members, 1 council member, and 1 alternate council member. The composition of quorum has been reduced from a requirement of 4 members to form quorum to a minimum of 3 members to provide for more flexibility in holding appeals within the required timeframe. Recognizing the importance for board members to maintain neutrality and reduce perceived bias, it is recommended that SDAB members not be permitted to be appointed to any other town planning and development-related committee. As there is a crossover period of current appointed committee members at this time, this provision will not come into effect until January 1st, 2025. SDAB members are required to take compulsory training as set out by the province before they are qualified to participate in an SDAB hearing. The training ensures a minimum standard of practice for land planning decisions within a tribunal hearing setting and provides members the tool to conduct effective hearings, deal with common procedural issues, and make well-written, legally sound, and principled decisions. The training is valid for a 3-year period and is only provided by a few provincially certified training bodies. The training is administered through either 1 full day or 4 half-day training sessions held during the weekdays. To further ensure the SDAB remains up to date on legislative, regulatory, and procedural requirements, administration recommends continued town-facilitated professional development and training for board members throughout their term, and this will include an annual self-evaluation process to identify any procedural challenges or improvements that may be required. The role of the SDAB chair is to open the hearing, introduce the panel, and explain the process to those in attendance, manage the hearing in an orderly and respectful process, and provide procedural direction as required, ensure all parties have a fair opportunity to present their case and respond to the case against them, and sign decisions on behalf of the SDAB. The proposed bylaw amends the selection of the SDAB chair to occur at the beginning of each hearing from among those members present to hear the appeal, rather than appointing 1 member as chair for the year. This change promotes increased independence and impartiality of the board and provides greater flexibility in scheduling hearings. Both council and public members would be eligible to serve as chair for a hearing, and the selection of the chair will occur at the start of the hearing through advanced consultation with the SDAB clerk. Administration will implement chair training for SDAB members to equip them with the tools they need to fulfill their duties. The MGA requires that a body who establishes an SDAB must also appoint 1 or more clerks. The clerk is also required to take compulsory training as set out by the province before they are qualified to act as clerk at an SDAB hearing. The SDAB clerk is a designated officer of the municipality and, like the board, acts independently as the clerk of the SDAB while fulfilling that role. The clerk duties include administering and processing planning and development appeals, providing general process information to appellants and the public, arranging hearing dates and member panels, providing notification as per statutory requirements, acting as the conduit between the SDAB and both the municipality and the public, supporting the board in the performance of their duties and providing procedural guidance, preparing a record of proceedings during the hearing, and sending out board decisions. The quasi-judicial nature of an SDAB results in the board being delegated decision-making authority under the MGA. Decisions of the board have a binding and permanent impact on the municipality. SDAB members have a responsibility to review comprehensive agendas and require knowledge and awareness of numerous pieces of land use planning, legislation, regulations, policies, and bylaw. Members must complete compulsory provincially mandated training before they are authorized to participate in hearings, and refresher training is required every 3 years. Notification for scheduled hearings is time-sensitive with a short duration, as hearings must be held within 30 days of an appeal being filed. As the SDAB only meets when an appeal is filed, their workload is inconsistent and the timing between hearings varies. Over the past few years, the town's SDAB has met on average twice a year to hear appeals. Regardless of the frequency of meetings, the members are expected to remain up to date on applicable land use planning criteria. The current SDAB is voluntary in nature, and members are expected to commit a substantial amount of time in preparing for and attending the hearings, obtaining the required certification, and remaining current with relevant legislation. In recognition of the autonomy of the SDAB, the infrequency of a meeting schedule, and the expectations related to preparation, attendance, understanding, and process, administration is recommending that public members of the SDAB be provided an honorarium of $200 per hearing and a $200 honorarium to attend the required compulsory provincial training session. Advance review of agenda packages and attendance at town-led training events will continue to require voluntary participation of the members. The proposed SDAB bylaw before Council this evening captures the amendments as outlined during this presentation. In addition, administration is seeking Council's approval to provide the SDAB remuneration as outlined within the report. Thank you, and I'm available to respond to any questions of Council.
Thank you, Legislative Manager, for the thorough update on the SDAB. Members of Council, I'll open the floor for question specific to clarity or understanding. Please reserve your debate and discussion until after the motion is on the floor. Any questions? Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just for clarification, on page 57 of 104, I'm looking at 11.0.0 remuneration. And so in the presentation, I heard public board members specifically, and I think that's, I agree with that. But just looking through the bylaw, it doesn't seem to make any distinction. It just says members of the board. Is that consistent with what we want to do in remuneration for public members? Because I imagine we're not looking to remunerate council members that are sitting on them.
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Meyer, thank you for the question. The bylaw is written, the verbiage in the bylaw is written as it is, just to provide flexibility in case there's ever a consideration of compensation of both council members and public members. At this time, in this report, we are recommending remuneration for public members.
Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. Looking at page 60, in respect to the membership, 4.1.0, the board shall consist of up to 8 members, including 2 members of council appointed by resolution of council. And then again, down into section 7.1.0, the quorum at any board hearing shall be 3 members. You mentioned verbally in your presentation, and as we as council understand it, that there is a council appointee and then there is a council alternate. The way that I'm reading the bylaw, however, states that there are 2 members of council, and if our quorum is only set at 3, it doesn't appear that there's any restriction in the bylaw that would prevent 2 councillors from sitting at the same time on a singular panel. And with a minimum quorum of 3, we could have 2 councillors, 1 public member, and then council could essentially have a majority on that. Is there any modification that can be made to the bylaw to either A, clarify that the council appointees, the second is in relation as an alternate, or is there any way to add a clause that would state no more than 1 council member may sit in an individual hearing?
Thank you for the question through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie. So the Municipal Government Act actually restricts more than 1 council member sitting on a hearing. And we've worded the bylaw as such because we recognize there is an alternate council member. We wanted to make sure that we are appointing both council members as the ability to sit as a member. But we recognize internally one is the alternate, the way we appoint them through the organizational meeting. And just to touch on the quorum of 3, so ultimately, administration would strive to fulfill the SDAB panel with as many members as could attend. The reduction to 3 is just providing that flexibility for those times when we have a challenge getting members together in a quick time frame, that we can still hold that hearing and make sure we're in compliance with our legislative requirements.
Thank you, and then just follow up on that, if I may, Deputy Mayor. Excellent. And again, with the MGA being superseding legislation, obviously, that speaking to only having one council member applies. I'm more looking in relation to a layperson reading our bylaw and maybe not necessarily understanding the whole legislative requirement from MGA down. Is there the opportunity to add even a reference statement or something in along? I envision this as one of those hang-ups that we may see from a community member saying, oh, you can have 2 council members on there and your minimum's 3. You guys have just done this to allow council to. And yes, we can obviously explain superseding legislation. It's just sometimes easier if it's stated.
Thank you for the question. Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie, yes, we could definitely add in an additional clause. Further clarity.
Excellent, thank you. And then that wouldn't change anything necessarily this evening, correct? Because it's not changing the intent of the bylaw. That could just be an administrative adjustment.
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie, my suggestion would be that either we would only provide first and or second reading tonight and come back with the changes for third reading, or when we provide first reading, council could add that amendment in. So first reading with the following amendment, capture that, and then proceed with the additional readings.
Thank you.
Councillor Loynes?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. On page 47, it talks about where we got the $200 for honorarium, but it states here that where we looked was talking about half day, less than 4 hours, or a full day, which was more than 4 hours. But when we talk about honorarium, we're just saying $200 to our public members. I just wanted to clarify, is that regardless of the length of meeting?
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Loynes, thank you for the question. At this time, as it's a new process for us remunerating members, we're suggesting just a one-time fee, regardless of the length of our hearings. The couple hearings we've had over the last couple of years have run about 4 to 5 hours, so we felt that that appeared to be fair remuneration at this time.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. Councillor Hansard.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Clarification, please. In the Municipal Government Act, council appointees are particularly stipulated as a primary appointee and an alternate, or is it just stated 2 council members? So that in reality, either could attend, not always the primary or the person that is come to be known as the primary, but it could be either?
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Hansard, thank you for the question. The Municipal Act actually does not stipulate how many council members could be appointed as SDAB members. It just stipulates that only 1 member can sit on a panel at a time. So the 2 members that the town currently appoints have the same rights to be appointed to one of the hearing panels for the SDAB. Our current practice is that we have a designated member with an alternate who would come in place of that councillor member rep. That would be something that council could make a determination on.
Okay. Further to that, please. With respect to what you've said, I understand the concept of primary and alternate. However, many boards and committees throughout the capital region are doing away with alternates altogether. So when the Municipal Government Act stipulates multiple people, but only 1 can sit in any one hearing as a member of council, it seems to me that it's perhaps a bit antiquated then to refer to 1 as alternate. Is that a word that we've added? And is there any way that could be removed? Because it shouldn't in my mind, it could be either. If we're allowing two as part of our bylaw, it could be either. It doesn't always have to be the first person is always offered the opportunity, and the second only if the first person cannot or is not able to attend. At least that's how I read what was provided.
Thank you, through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Hansard. So the way we've written the bylaw by appointing 2 council members would ultimately allow for that, as you've suggested. This is, from what I understand, a town practice of having a designated member and an alternate, so that would ultimately be a decision of council.
Okay. Further. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. With respect, for years and years, there was always a primary to every board and committee we sat on, and an alternate. And that understanding is the primary would go unless they were unable to attend. And then and only then, the alternate would attend. So I think if we're going to go to the trouble to update it, I would like to do away with that antiquated piece and just let it be 2 council members. And then, however that gets accepted, or they answer back that they'll be able to attend, I suppose it could be the first one who responds, or the second, or maybe there's some other way to look at it. But it doesn't make good sense to me that we hang on to that primary and alternate when it isn't used in almost every other board and committee we sit on.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to Councillor Hansard, I think just a couple general comments here. So I believe I'll just say, the point you're making is understood. I don't know that it applies in this particular bylaw at this particular time. The way the bylaw is written would actually support the way you're speaking. In that the way it is written, there wouldn't be a primary necessarily. The bylaw itself just would have 2, and the practice from therein is, I believe, if I can give me some latitude, I believe you're speaking to the practice in the town of Stony Plain, where doesn't apply every time, not every particular committee, but generally, council has saw fit to appoint a primary and then an alternate, that in the event that the individual can't go, that the other person attends. I think that's a conversation council can have. I think there's other aspects, different committees, different process, whatever, where that applies, and you can have that conversation. I don't think it applies in this specific instance. Sorry. But I think, I'll just say, duly noted, and it may come up even on the next particular bylaw itself, but this one is actually pretty clear that there would technically be 2 that would be eligible to attend as long as they're not attending the same thing. And it's the practice that I think you're speaking to, not the bylaws writing itself, is my understanding of what your concern.
Go ahead, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you for that explanation. And it does make it clearer that it isn't an intent that there be a primary and an alternate. There's a little bit of a stigma in some people's minds that the primary person was appointed and isn't attending, so now it defaults to an alternate. And I would like to do away with that aspect, because the public, any council member who goes and sits is doing their job. And if someone is not able, doesn't mean that they weren't doing the job they were appointed there to do. So it's a good practice, I think, that we do away with this primary alternate concept, as most of all of the boards and committees in the rest of government are doing.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Any further questions for clarity? Seeing no more, Councillor Laurie with the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I will move that Town Council approve an honorarium of $200 per hearing for appointed public members of the SDAB, including a $200 honorarium for attending the mandatory provincial training session, and to give first reading to bylaw 2685/G/24, the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board bylaw. And Mr. Deputy Mayor, if you would entertain it, I would like to add reference to, with an amendment, to reference the MGA requirements respecting that no more than one councillor may sit on each individual SDAB panel.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Is that acceptable, administration?
Through the deputy mayor, that would be acceptable.
Thank you. Can we have that added to? We can take a 2-minute break while you get that up there.
Through the deputy mayor, I just need probably 20 seconds and I'll get it up there for you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I've heard that from her before, 30 seconds required.
We just want to make sure that it's clear for everybody sitting at council table. We'll get there. Thank you, administration. Is everybody on council clear with the motion that's on the floor? Councillor Loynes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just for clarification, when we talk about the $200 honorarium for attending the mandatory provincial training, we had mentioned earlier that it was either going to be one day or divided between a couple days. It's strictly just for the total amount of training, correct? They're not going to get paid if we separate it into 3 or 4 days.
Through the deputy mayor to Councillor Loynes, that is the intention, that it's a one-time payment and the members can choose to select which way they want to attend for that $200.
Thank you.
Yeah, through the motion, it is a $200 honorarium for attending the mandatory provincial training session. It's not specific to days or opportunities. Council, I'll open the floor for debate and discussion. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Fully support this. I think it's about time, recognizing the public members' commitment to the SDAB. I think the members that we've had on the SDAB have done a fantastic job, and it is intensive. It does require a lot of work. It does require a lot of commitment and understanding. So I'm very happy to see this come forward. And then just a point of clarity that I want to make as well. As much as we talk about council members sitting on a panel, the reality is that a council member does not have to sit on the panel, that the public members themselves could form the entirety of the panel without a council member present. And I think it would be prudent, as we continue to keep our eyes on this in the future, that we consider the involvement of council even at all in the SDAB, and as to whether council should have a place in that, or whether we should allow that to be an independent panel of council members. And should we need the opinion of the municipality brought forward, we would be able to have either the town manager or a designate or somebody actually come speak as a representative to the panel during the appeal itself.
I'll just make a general comment then. Thank you. I totally will support this, as well as this has been on the table for a number of years, and I think that it's important that we acknowledge as we move through to get quality people, you're going to have to do something to attract them, and I think this is a great way. I also do think that it's, a time that council should sit back and take a look at whether or not a council member should be on this committee. This is a committee that really should not sit on anything else within the community to make decisions based on an appeal. And I think with the training that's available today, there's a good opportunity for our local people to be on it. And I also think that there's a number of people within our community that have the land use knowledge that we would be able to attract some of them to this committee. So great job, administration, on bringing this forward. Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing no more questions, I'll call the question for the first reading. All in favor? That is carried. Moving to second reading. Members of council, any questions specific to clarity or understanding? Seeing none, Councilor Loynes for the motion.
Council give second reading to bylaw 2685/G/24 as amended.
Thank you, Councilor Loynes. The floor is open for debate and discussion. Holy cow. Seeing none, I will call the question for the second reading. All in favor? And that is carried as well. Thank you. Moving to unanimous consent. The Municipal Government Act states a proposed bylaw must not have more than 2 readings at a council meeting unless the councilors present unanimously agree to consider third reading. Councilor Myers for the motion, please.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I move that Town Council give unanimous consent to consider third reading of bylaw 2685/G/24.
The floor is open for debate and discussion. Seeing none, I will call the question for unanimous consent. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Moving to third reading. Members of council, any questions specific to clarity or understanding? Seeing none, Councilor Hansard with the motion, please.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I move to give third reading to bylaw 2685G24.
Thank you, Councilor Hansard. The floor is open for debate and discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question for third reading. All in favor? That motion is carried. Let us adjourn for 10 minutes if we could.
Thank you. Through the Deputy Mayor to all of Council, the Committee Governance Framework Bylaw is before Council this evening for consideration. The framework was presented during the March 4th Governance and Priorities Committee meeting and outlines general requirements related to the formation of council-appointed committees, including types of committee, structure, authority, reporting mechanism to council, composition, term, member selection, procedures, and administrative support. During the March 4th meeting, Council posed some questions related to the framework, which have been included in the report to summarize the responses. The report also includes information with respect to consideration of voluntary versus remunerated committee participation. Administration is seeking 3 readings of the bylaw to formalize Council's committee governance framework. Once the bylaw is passed, Phase 3 of the committee review project will move forward to review the existing council-appointed committee terms of reference with an intent to bring forward their establishing bylaws prior to the end of 2024. Legislative Services will also work with the committees to facilitate open meetings by publishing notice of the meetings and the applicable agendas on the town's website. Approval of the bylaw will include the repeal of 3 council policies that will no longer be required as the processes are captured in the applicable establishing process. Administration is seeking all 3 readings of the bylaw this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Administration. Members of Council, I'll open the floor for questions specific to clarity or understanding. Please reserve your debate and discussion until after the motion is on the floor. Any questions? Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you to administration, first of all, just recognizing the work that's been done. I think we've seen a lot of different presentations about this. I'm very happy to see it come forward and get these cleaned up in the way it has. Had a question in regards to the public notice and being open to the public, and it is the use of technology. We know in our council meetings, we are streaming our council meetings live, and that has resulted in positive public engagement and transparency and so on. I'm wondering if that's something that's being considered, not necessarily as a part of this bylaw, but as something that we will look to introduce into the future into our individual committees that we're forming, as well as potentially into the likes of SDAB?
Thank you for the question through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie. So it's definitely something we can explore. There's I guess a bit of a nuance there to make sure that the public members are comfortable, you know, in the role of having their meetings live streamed or living on YouTube forever when they're public members representing the community. So I would suggest that, you know, we would want to make sure that we set that up so that people who are putting their name forward would be aware of that part of the process, if that is something council wishes to explore further. At this time, we are not proposing to live stream or video the advisory committees. Standing committees would be a different scenario, but it's definitely something we could explore for future.
Thank you, if I may. So with that, my understanding with these changes is that these committees are now going to be open to the public. And so, as you mentioned, agendas, dates, everything are all going to be posted on the website for public consumption, and the public is going to be able to attend. That, in my understanding, then that would not prevent the public, members of the media, et cetera, from photographing, videoing, and quoting in any way, shape, or form, would it?
Thank you for the question through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie. So the intention is the meetings are open to the public, and the public members could come in and observe the meeting. The media could come in and observe the meeting. If our current town policy allows for photos to be taken during a meeting, then those photos may possibly be taken. Some of that may be outlined in the terms of reference for the committee, kind of putting some procedure around that, but ultimately people could come in and observe and hear what was happening in the proceedings.
Yeah, Mr. Deputy Mayor, if I can maybe add a little bit of context there too. So, as I believe the manager indicated, going forward, a full standing committee of council we have work to do. There'd be some, administrative efforts that would have to go into it, but you could probably picture a setting similar to this, where yes, a member of the press is free to walk in, sit down, take pictures of the proceedings, write down what people are saying, and so on and so forth. And I think that's the notion on a full council standing committee as defined in the bylaw. As we get into the other ones, the advisories and the other thing, we could put some other process, procedure, administrative perspectives into how that would look ultimately at the end. But the standing committees, if you're wanting, what would that look like in your minds? It would look very similar to the setting we're in right now.
So thank you very much, and yeah, in regards to that, appreciate the clarity that's provided, and I'll look forward to, as we start developing those terms of references and seeing that come forward. I think part of this change is an improvement in our transparency and our accessibility to the public, and I'm hoping we won't see too much restriction to that as those policies and references or terms of references are developed. So thank you.
Through the Deputy Mayor, if I just may further clarify. So with the passing of this bylaw, we will strive over the next few months to move the existing committees into that more open and transparent process. But we recognize, there's a little bit of work to do, but our intention is to have everything in place by the end of the year. So as each of the committees comes forward, we can have conversation with them, work through their terms of reference, and start to publish those agendas and provide notification as required.
Thank you, administration. Any further questions for clarity or understanding? Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just for clarity, the proposed changes in recognition in our lead sheet that are, I guess I'd call them proposed, are not actually in this bylaw, correct? We're not actually considering honorariums here.
So through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Meyer, thank you for the question. So remuneration for committee members doesn't specifically need to be outlined in a bylaw. That can be set by council resolution. So at this time, the bylaw does not incorporate any kind of remuneration in the terms outlined. However, it doesn't exclude council from considering that today or in the future. At this time, the proposal has not requested remuneration at today's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Myers. Any further discussion? Councilor Hansard.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just for clarification, on page 84, I realize that, I'm just looking for the number, sorry, I've got to scroll. 1.0 mentions that the current boards and committees adhering to this policy include but are not limited to, and then there's a list. If a committee ceases to be, if council decides that there will be no more of one or two committees, then those committees could go away. We're not forced to keep them. In other words, something like the Council Compensation Review Committee. We're not forced to keep that simply because it's now stated as part of this bylaw. Am I correct?
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Hansard, thank you for your question. So the page that you're referring to is an existing council policy that we are repealing today. And so the bylaw before council is the governance framework that doesn't specify the actual committees. It just provides a framework for the types of committees that can be established. Going forward, any council-appointed committee that council establishes will be done so by the establishing bylaw for that specific committee. If council sets a committee and then wishes to dispose of the committee, the bylaw for that committee would need to be repealed.
Clarification. Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Ms. Olson, we would only repeal that little part of the bylaw, not a larger part of the bylaw. Is that correct?
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Hansard. So the bylaw that's before you today is the overarching bylaw that will help council determine how to establish committees and what types of committees to establish. Then going forward, for every single committee you wish to establish, it will have to have its own establishing bylaw that sets out its purpose, mandate, and terms of reference. So when a committee finalizes the work it's doing and it's time to dispose of the committee, or council determines they no longer need the committee, then a repeal bylaw for that specific committee's mandate and terms of reference would come forward to dispose of the committee.
So at this current time, I don't see Growth and Commerce Committee listed here. Would that be the intent, that Growth and Commerce would be one of these committees where they would be public?
So through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Hansard, I think the page that, again, that you're looking at, those committees that are listed there are not the committees that we're specifically thinking about with respect to this bylaw. Those are committees that were addressed by that policy we're looking to repeal. So the Growth and Commerce Committee will be part of the establishing bylaws that are coming forward for purpose, mandate, terms of reference. The Growth and Commerce Committee would be considered a standing committee of council as per our framework, and that will be coming forward prior to the end of 2024 for review.
Okay. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, all we're doing with this right now is repealing the old. Looking at repealing the old. We're not addressing in any way, shape, or form what will take the place of this bylaw. Is that correct?
So through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Hansard, on page 84 is a council policy that we're repealing. The bylaw that's before council, again, is providing the overarching framework for committees as a whole. And when we approve that overarching bylaw, then that will set in motion the steps to bring forward all of the existing committees, Growth and Commerce, Cultural Roundtable, the Community Social Development Roundtable, and the Planning Advisory Committee, to bring forward their establishing bylaws. and then sets a framework. This bylaw today sets a framework for any new or considerations of committees in the future.
Okay, further to that, Mr. Deputy Mayor, if we have concerns about a committee such as Growth and Commerce, where when you are talking about sensitive decisions being made by a developer as to which community they may wish to establish themselves in, and they have asked for confidentiality to be honored by the municipality, is that meeting or those meetings going to be open to the public then? Because it's very hard to hold public observers to a confidential agreement or even a confidential request because they're not obligated in any way, shape, or form. I have a bit of a concern about that. So in allowing the old to go away, which I would agree is probably time to do that, we don't yet really know what will come to us in the future. The public aspect of every board and committee being open does concern me because it can make the difference in a very big way as to whether a developer will agree to set up shop in your community or somewhere else, because if they don't have their request for confidentiality honored, they don't feel they can trust the municipality. So will there be opportunity for us to discuss this in more detail before that new replacement of this comes forward?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Hansard. The short answer is yes. Those dialogues will still be able to happen both in a administratively bringing forward to council, and then at council as a whole, we'll have the opportunity to have that dialogue. I believe, Councillor Hansard, you're referencing the GCC Growth and Commerce Committee, but the dialogues will be about any of the existing ones and how they fit into this framework, or maybe how they don't and what needs to be changed, as well as any future existing committees that council may wish to create. Speaking to confidentiality matters of any course in any committee, within the framework of the bylaw, essentially the full rules of closed session or a closed session would or could apply. They could either be written directly into the enabling bylaw. They are noted in this one. Questions about confidentiality on that matter or any other matter that within the rights of, the FOIP legislations as they apply, can be housed and done, I would say, akin to how members of council would see them functioning in a full council meeting.
Okay.
And, sorry, maybe I'll just add, anybody present, regardless of if they're elected official, administrative, member of the public, are all bound by the requirements of those closed session requirements, sorry.
Hey, thank you for the question. Any further questions for clarity or understanding? Seeing no more discussion, Councillor Loynes with the motion, please.
Town Council give first reading in bylaw 2684/G/24, a bylaw to establish committees governance framework bylaw and repeal council policy A, citizens at large board member selection, C-LS-030, B, ex officio members 263/04/00 SP, and C, recognition of boards and committee members 175/06/06/SP.
Thank you, Councillor Loynes. The floor is open for debate and discussion. Seeing no more questions, I will call the question for the first reading. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Moving to second reading. Members of council, any questions specific to clarity or understanding? Seeing none, Councillor Laurie for the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'll move the Town Council give second reading to bylaw 2684/G/24.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. The floor is open for debate and discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question for second reading. All in favor? That motion is carried. Moving to unanimous consent. As stated earlier this evening, a proposed bylaw must not have more than 2 readings at a council meeting unless the councillors present unanimously agree to consider the third reading. Councillor Hansard with the motion, please.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I move that Town Council give unanimous consent to consider third reading of bylaw 2684 G24.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. The floor is open for debate and discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question for unanimous consent. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving to third reading. Members of council, any questions specific to clarity or understanding? Seeing none, Councillor Myers for the motion, please.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, the Town Council give third reading to bylaw 2684/G/24.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. The floor is open for debate and discussion. Seeing none, I will call the question. The third reading, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We will now proceed with tonight's business item, council compensation and expense review. Administration, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. Through the Deputy Mayor to all of Council. Council approved an amendment to the Council Compensation and Expense Policy in January to authorize administration to determine the appropriate manner in which to conduct a council compensation and expense review using one or more of a variety of options. Administration committed to updating Council on the manner that was selected for the 2024 review. The information report before Council identifies that an administrative review will be used to complete the review, utilizing a combination of options. The review will consist of an assessment of historical compensation for Town of Stony Plain elected officials, Metro Region compensation patterns, analysis of a selection of Alberta Mayor and Councillor salaries reflective of comparable Alberta municipalities of similar size and services, and a review of cash and non-cash benefits. Administration will engage a third party to evaluate the salary comparative and market analysis, and the review process is expected to be completed by the end of Q3 and brought forward for Council's consideration. The goal of this review is to ensure the Town of Stony Plain is providing fair, consistent, and adequate compensation for elected officials. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Legislative Manager, for the council compensation update. I think it's a great package that we've had come forward over the past number of years. It's been something that's been always on council's radar, so I think administration has heard us quite well. Council, the floor is open for questions of clarity and understanding of the presentation. Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. 2 questions, the first of which relates to this is being presented to Council near the end of Q3 in consideration for further approval in the 2025-27 corporate plan. I believe previous reviews, when it came back to Council, the new policies were not applicable until after the next municipal election. So it typically did not apply or impact the sitting council at the time. Is that the same intention on this one, or is the intention that when this does come forward in Q3, that those changes would actually be applicable to the current sitting council for the 1 year remaining in their term?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Plechko, through to Councillor Laurie. Yes, so typical historic practice was that the recommendations would be made, they would be accepted, altered, approved by a sitting council for implementation after the next term. The incoming council would be under those rules, processes, or what have you. One of the aspects that I know I wanted to at least have some room to make recommendations to council for. We're just on the streamlining of the processes, the streamlining of the policies itself, and where it may or may not have some intersection with some of the administrative benefits. So, not necessarily not speaking directly to the dollar amount compensations, but some of the other aspects of the benefit programs that are applicable to administrative staff and have in the past been applicable to elected officials. Some of those may be implemented or be recommended for implementation prior to the post-2025 election. But without going further onto it, what the intent would be that there was some room for that, and those would be clear recommendations to council that they would be able to review and consider. So I'll just stop and say intent is that in all likelihood, majority of would be following that traditional pattern of implementation going into after an election. But I wanted a little bit of room administratively to examine that and have some clear recommendations to council.
Thank you very much. And then we'll just follow up on that. So I appreciate that. And then in respect to the process itself, is there any planned council engagement or public engagement or opportunity for feedback in the development of the new policy? Or is the new policy going to be solely held through administration? I know, for example, as a sitting councillor, there's things that I've seen in other municipalities or things I've been made aware of within our own that may be applied differently that we'd like to provide that feedback on as part of the consideration and the review. If you can just flush out how that process may move forward for us.
Thank you for the question through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie. So one of the things we are contemplating through our administrative review is an engagement survey of some sorts through to Council for some of that feedback specifically. At this time, we don't have a public engagement plan, but it's something that we can discuss and see if it fits into the review as the review rolls out over the next few months.
Excellent, thank you.
Any further questions? No? Seeing none? Councillor Laurie with the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'll move that Town Council accept the council compensation and expenses review report for information.
Any debate or discussion on the motion? Seeing none? Oh, Councillor Hansard.
Just a question, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The numbers that we're looking at here, in and around page 99, 98, and so forth, we're not talking about looking at these at this time or discussing them. We're talking about merely approving the process whereby administration will begin to take this apart piece by piece and come back to council and engage in this survey or other means of feedback from council. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Hansard. So in January, when Council approved the policy change, that gave administration authority to move forward, as you noted. Today's information report is just providing Council acknowledgement of which options we've chosen to select to look through the review, the compensation pieces, the non-cash and cash benefits to be able to bring a recommendation forward for council.
Thank you, administration. So I'd just like to make a comment. I'd like to comment tonight that the lead sheets that were provided to us from administration were very good on each one of the aspects that we had. Each one has answered a lot of questions, and as you can see from council, they've been answered fairly well with the lack of questions. However, I do think that the questions that council did ask tonight were very much needed as part of the package as well. So I thank each one of the councilor members. At this time, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. And we'll open it up for council discussion. Councillor Myers.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Not much from me this evening. I would like to thank the Stony Plain Youth Center for inviting council out to their Sports Fest this afternoon. I threw on the old Kangoo boots and hopped about. I think there's pictures.
Can't wait to see those.
Yeah, I can't either. So I didn't injure myself or anything like that. So thank you to them, and that's all for me this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. Councillor Loynes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to mention that the Easter egg hunt is on Saturday, the 30th, where our lovely staff in Easter Bunny go around hiding treats. And if you find one, just to follow the instructions to be entered into a grand prize. And again, that is on Saturday, the 30th. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Loynes. Councillor Hansard.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I wanted to give kudos to our communications department and our communications officer, Ms. Barsby Busfair, for the good job they did in putting together the video that was presented at the State of the Region. I heard lots of good comments. And as always, there are people who make suggestions on what they think could be improved in all the videos. But it was an enjoyable evening, and I really appreciate communications playing such a vital role in telling people what the town of Stony Plain is all about. Also, I want to give kudos to the chamber. I was surprised at how well everything ran, considering the big changeover that they've had at the chamber. And everybody that I talked to there seemed to have a very nice time and enjoyed the evening. And I think our neighboring councils were very proud, perhaps even a little bit cocky about their videos, but it was an enjoyable evening, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Not much for me this evening, just recognition. As you mentioned, the weather is still pretty unpredictable, but you know, we've had days where we've seen lots of people out enjoying the community and that, and with this week being spring break, just a reminder that there's going to be a lot more running out into traffic as they've been cooped up for quite some time, and the kids have a little bit of free reign. So again, just a reminder to residents that we're into that season now where we're going to see a little bit more of that activity. And I've seen lots of motorbikes and bicyclists and joggers and walkers out, and so I know we've got a little bit of an update that we're going to be getting on our street and trail cleaning here in the coming weeks, and just a reminder to exercise caution while we work on that. So appreciate all the work that our administration does, all the work that town staff does as always, and thank you very much for the great information and lead sheets as you mentioned this evening. It makes it an easy package to read when we have that much information in front of us, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. And for me this evening, I just wanted to mention the excellent job of promoting the Easter egg hunt. It's all over social media, and it's something that we're able as councillors to share with the public as well. And I look forward to seeing the town ravished with a bunch of young people running around looking for the prizes that they're out there for it. I did have the opportunity this week to go to an EMRB meeting, learned a lot there. That's a great committee within our region that supports development in a number of ways, and the guest speakers they had there were really, really good. And I just wanted to remind all the kids today, ponds, they are deceptive looking. They look like they're froze, but they've unthawed and refroze just the top. So it is a very thin layer of ice that's on there. Please stay off the ponds. And that is it for this evening. That brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. With that, the meeting is adjourned.